China's economy is plunging into an unprecedented dire phase, sounding deafening alarms that the Chinese government is trying to muffle, but they're growing too loud to ignore.
China's yuan is at a 16-year low, and the country appears to be experiencing deflation.
But it also created a leaning tower of debt. That same survey found that property accounted for 3/4 of household liability.
You would know, judging from appearances at that trilateral summit, that there is trouble brewing back home. But that has been the case in Beijing, notably on the diplomatic front, with the disappearances of high-level Chinese officials. That has worried other countries and raised lots of questions about what is happening with Xi Jinping and his leadership.
As tens of millions of Chinese youths leave school, jobs are few and far between.
This looming collapse is an ominous warning sign to America and to the entire world as we're witnessing the unsettling, unraveling in real time. So what do we need to know about this? China's not exactly being transparent, most recently halting economic data releases to keep the world in the dark, which is just not a good sign. What they are hiding is that their state-controlled economy is unraveling due to debt, misguided investments, and eroding credibility. But the question is, how bad could it get? And what impact could it have on you? And most importantly, what can you do to prepare? So let's talk about it. 3 reasons China could shock the world. Number 1, uninformed population. The course and direction of a country is often determined by its citizens, and China's citizenry is becoming increasingly upset and agitated, or are they? Some things we know, and some things we don't. We know the suppression of information and censorship might keep them from blaming their problems on the Chinese government, and the government is keeping information from them. Now, the Chinese Communist Party had a botched COVID response. They had draconian lockdowns of apartment complexes and factories. Workers were forced to work instead of going home. Then suddenly, all measures were lifted as if they never even occurred. China has ceased reporting economic data that could reveal its true economic health. For instance, they stopped publishing youth unemployment figures recently, citing a need to review their methodology. And the most recent available data showed a record high youth unemployment rate of 21.3% in June for those aged 16 to 24. It's even possible that it's even higher now, possibly exceeding 25%, but we lack current information. In addition, China has a limited access for foreign users to corporate registries and academic journals. They also clamp down on due diligence firms, which are vital sources of information for overseas businesses interested in China. And it's evident that the Chinese government is actively suppressing information and engaged in extensive damage control. The Chinese people, they don't really understand how teetering their economy truly is because the government doesn't want them to know. Even today, if the ruling Chinese Communist Party doesn't like data or it reflects negatively on them, they just don't report it. And the world has to wonder what's really going on in the people's minds, what they actually know and what they don't, and whether their frustration level will ever be more potent than the government's ability to hold them down. Number 2, overbuilding and collapse. China has followed an investment-led economic growth model, heavily focusing on infrastructure and construction. However, this approach has led to significant overbuilding, with excess housing units that could house twice the entire Chinese population. Did you catch that? There's way more residences available than the entire population could possibly need. And in China, home ownership for investment is favored over stocks. And as a result, China has responded to this by building and building and building, giving people to buy properties that are sitting vacant. Unlike the United States, China's stock market is less closely tied to the economy at individual and corporate levels. And Chinese firms tend to rely more on bank loans and retained earnings rather than equity financing, in contrast to the United States companies. And only around 7% of Chinese households own stocks compared to 53% in the United States. Now, what this does is it leads to a liquidity issue, and it's easier to sell stocks than vacant properties in a market with a surplus of available properties. And this has led to the citizenry purchasing homes enthusiastically as an investment vehicle, leading them to invest in multiple apartments, accumulating second, third, and even fourth properties. And as the economy suffers, however, they find themselves unable to make payments on some of these properties and unable to unload them to take a loss on them. Again, that's 2 residences available for each person. And this massive overbuild presents a problem that surpasses anything in the American subprime crisis. Now, this has been unraveling at a staggering pace, even as a government takes drastic measures to desperately try to stop the free fall. The collapse of Evergrande, a massive Chinese real estate company with over 1,300 projects in more than 280 cities, has sent shockwaves through China's real estate market, one of the world's largest, employing over 2.8 million people. And as of 2021, Evergrande was grappling with $300 billion in liabilities, failing to meet its obligations to suppliers and offshore lenders, ultimately defaulting on its creditors. Now, this default triggered a market panic, a cascade of defaults, and nationwide protests that were forcefully suppressed. The ongoing real estate crisis, now spanning 2 years, has raised concerns about financial system contagion risk and is likely contributing to job cuts, housing market declines, and an economic slowdown in China, the full magnitude of which remains uncertain and of global significance. Now, if the subprime real estate bubble collapse of 2008 in the United States that rippled worldwide and plunged many economies into a deep recession was bad, you can imagine that China's overleveraged position in real estate is likely far, far worse. Now, foreign direct investments in China's real estate market is quite extensive, but still, these investors are getting rather skittish as the Chinese Communist Party continues to demonstrate that it is having difficulty righting the ship that is its economy. The government continues to struggle to radically adjust and prop the economy up, even as they crack down on billionaire tycoons and use them as scapegoats. Their desperation has led China to seek and secure substantial resource deals with Russia during the conflict in Ukraine and Russia's urgent quest for allies and markets. Now, these agreements have the potential to entirely redirect global energy and grain sales, potentially leading to a profound transformation of long-standing trade agreements. Now, these known and unknown deals are altering geopolitics and will have an unknown future consequence worldwide. Number 3, shifting markets. It's a well-publicized fact that the United States has been in economic war with China as it decouples its economy from them. And whether that can be completely done and whether we even want to do that is still in question. But recent years have brought a host of economic moves. The United States has taken various financial measures, including imposing tariffs on Chinese imports and embargoing advanced technology sales. And most notable in this decoupling has been the CHIPS Act, designed to boost domestic semiconductor manufacturing and research, enhance supply chain security, and promote workforce development to reduce the reliance on foreign sources for critical semiconductor components. It has also put a significant drag on China's production capabilities. These actions aim to reduce imports, protect or bring back the United States jobs, and even safeguard American infrastructure. But however, despite these efforts, true decoupling remains more of a geopolitical goal than an economic reality, as China's share in United States imports has declined from 21.6% to 16.3% between 2017 and 2022. And as a matter of fact, Mexico has surpassed China as the United States' leading trade partner. How effective any of these measures has been, only time will tell. But one thing that has been accomplished with certainty is that all these measures have driven China to explore other markets for its goods and resources. China has struck long-term energy resource deals with Russia, which will have far-reaching implications for global supplies and forever has altered the flow of global energy resources. At the moment, China and Russia have struck a massive deal allowing China to import vast quantities of wheat and oil from Russia. And this is all fine. Who cares where they buy their grain or oil from, right? Except these purchases significantly fund and prop up the Russian economy, solidifying new supply lines as other supply lines have evaporated. If anything should happen to Russia, like Putin's reign ending or large-scale crop failures, China suddenly has nowhere to turn to feed its people. And it lacks the physical resources to pay up to get the food it needs for its 1.4 billion people. China has sought to bolster its markets in a new authoritarian leading world realignment, and the New World Order is rapidly emerging. The Chinese government has managed to keep its economy afloat through savvy deals, maneuvering, and going from misrepresenting and misreporting numbers to simply not reporting them anymore. These temporary bounce backs, they haven't managed to flip the economy into the black, but they have kept it from free falling. They haven't fixed the underlying problems, and for years with each, the rest of the world has wondered when the whole thing will fall apart. So let's assume for a minute that the shaky economy, the risky deals that countries run by despots, the changing and new supply lines where the people of China, they stop working nicely. Let's assume one of these fails, crashing the entire Chinese economy. What would that mean to you and me? What would that mean to the world? China implodes. Now what? If the Chinese economy were to implode suddenly, the consequences for the rest of the world would be substantial and multifaceted. Individuals and businesses should prepare for several potential scenarios. First, the collapse of the Chinese economy would trigger a global recession due to its significant role in the world economy. People should be prepared for possible job losses, reduced economic growth, and financial market volatility. And if all the parts and ingredients in everything from medicines to Global Hawk, unmanned surveillance drones carried labels as to where it was made, you would be shocked to learn that much of it still comes from China. And dependence on cheap Chinese manufactured items, it's not an addiction that's easily broken. China is the world's largest producer of pharmaceutical ingredients and produces and exports around 40% of the world's active pharmaceutical ingredients, or APIs. Now, these APIs predominantly flow to India, which is the world's largest provider of generic medicines by volume, accounting for 20% of global pharmaceutical exports. India also manufactures 60% of all vaccines in the world. And if China implodes, the world's supply of medicines will immediately plunge to critically low levels. China is a central manufacturing hub, and its production disruptions could lead to various product shortages. And we caught a glimpse of that with the COVID lockdowns, but the country's economic collapse would be magnitudes greater in impact. The United States imports massive quantities of manufactured goods from China, including 70% of Walmart's store merchandise and 40% of the clothing sold domestically. It's not just retail stores that would suddenly find themselves without inventory. In 2020, the United States imported machinery valued at $41 billion from China, making it one of the largest importers of Chinese machinery. Now, additionally, in 2021, the U.S. imported $13 billion worth of electrical machinery, primarily sourced from, you guessed it, China. Now, these figures highlight the significant reliance on Chinese machinery and electrical equipment in the United States market. Now imagine farmers suddenly unable to repair or maintain their equipment. Imagine water companies unable to replace failing equipment. And imagine electrical companies without the necessary equipment and materials to maintain the grid. The quantity of these imports versus domestically manufactured products, it fluctuates yearly as these governments clash. However, they still find their way here to some degree, even if it's via India or some other intermediary country. No one is ready to see what happens if that supply suddenly ceases. Now, I focus on the primary impact of China's economic implosion, what it would do to the United States, but emerging countries and trade partners worldwide, they're going to be impacted as well. Businesses, manufacturers, and distributors worldwide would immediately suffer to an extent large enough to perhaps even topple some countries. This year, we've seen how economic pressures and the application of foreign governments' influence can directly lead to rebellions and the toppling of established governments. Now, the global dynamics can change considerably when critical food imports to starving countries suddenly stop. The geopolitical ramifications of a Chinese economic collapse could lead to significant shifts in global power dynamics. People should be prepared for potential changes in international alliances and trade relationships, which could affect their country's foreign policy and economic strategies. China, forced into desperate measures to sustain its power and economy, they could seek to deflect attention and blame by sparking a conflict in the South China Sea or with Taiwan. China could sell lethal arms and armaments to Russia in exchange for a more significant stake in the resources in the Siberian region. Now, any number of odd, desperate, or unfriendly alliances could be openly and secretly agreed to in an attempt to stay afloat. What can you do? As China's economy continues to crumble, it's going to be big and it's going to be painful. Let's be honest, if you were to stop what you're doing right now and just simply look around your room, I'd be willing to wager that the majority of what surrounds you, and I can say this for my own situation as I talk to you, these items, they pretty much originate some way or another from China. We've become so reliant on China's cheap manufacturing for so long that we've gotten addicted. So the short answer is that the stuff won't be cheap anymore. But as a prepper, I always return to the critical items of food and water. I always suggest having a water supply and a means to treat and filter to make sure that it's ready to go. And that's why we cover water storage on this channel and encourage you to begin learning how to produce your own food. Now look, I realize that gardening, it's not easy and it requires your time and money. But as you lessen your dependence on systems that will eventually fail, no matter if you're starting out, you have enough food for a week, you're on the right path. You may not be able to change China's trajectory, but you can bolster your ability to make it through the economic fallout of a Chinese implosion by getting your own preps in order. I would encourage you to watch our video on building a 2-week essential food supply to start, because this could turn bad quickly. I'll post a link to it up here on the screen, and you can click on that if you want to watch that video next. So what's your thoughts? What steps are you taking to prepare for this issue and others that are on the horizon? Let us know in the comments section below. As always, stay safe out there.